everyone and welcome back to another video. This week we have got a workout video. It has been so long since I've done like any workout style videos, so I thought it was about time that I did another one. As you can see from the title, we have got a glute workout, and I have done a couple of these in the past, but this time I've decided to go for more of a beginner friendly glute workout. A lot of my other ones are quite not necessarily advanced, but I know that some of the exercises like beginners might struggle to set it up, or they might not be confident enough to go into certain areas of the gym or like use specific pieces of equipment. I thought it would be useful to do just a really simple glute workout that anyone can do. Whether you've been going to the gym for years or whether you're completely brand new, then this is something for everyone. So all the exercises that I'm going to go through are glute focused. I'm going to take you through the correct technique and like how to set up, how you can adapt them, and like little things that you can do to sort of like really help you to feel them in your glutes a little bit more. So let's get into the workout. So the workout is made up of 6 different exercises. Obviously there are a lot of other exercises that are really good for your glutes, but these are just some of my favourites and ones that I personally find work really well. So we're going to start off with a hip thrust. I'm pretty sure in all of my other glute workout videos I've always had some variation of a hip thrust. It is such a good exercise for your glutes, but I know that the setup can often be quite intimidating, especially if you're new to the gym and if you're kind of in quite a busy gym where there's not like a set space for it. It can feel quite nerve-wracking. I know that that does put a lot of people off. So I've gone with a dumbbell hip thrust for this beginner workout because I just feel like that's a little bit easier to set up, especially when you're a beginner. In the little demonstration clip that I filmed that you'll see in a second, I used one of the plyo boxes that are in the gym. It's a 40 centimeter one, I think, and I find that that's a really good height for me. You don't need to use a box. You can use one of the benches that's in the gym. Just beware if you're using a bench. Some of the benches in some gyms are a little bit too high, so just kind of make sure that it's the right kind of height if you're using a bench. You can also use one of the aerobic steps that most gyms have. Again, just kind of make sure that it's on like the highest setting, or use like a couple kind of stacked up against the wall. Most gyms kind of have those in a studio where they run classes, so it can be quite good to use a step if you're really not that confident in the gym. You can kind of be like tucked away in the studio in like your own little space, and you probably feel like a bit less self-conscious if that's something that you struggle with in the gym. Those are the 3 kind of main options that you can use to lean on in a hip thrust. So you want to have the bottom of your shoulder blades resting on the corner of your box or your bench or your step, whatever you're using, and you want to have the dumbbell resting on your hips. You want to have your feet directly under your knees. Keeping your chin tucked in, you're going to drive your hips up, squeeze your bum at the top, and then lower back down. Make sure that that chin is tucked in the whole way through. As you can see in the video, I've added a little pause at the top of every rep, and that's just to kind of increase the intensity a little bit. With a dumbbell, obviously you are kind of limited to lighter weights, so that just kind of helps to increase the intensity and make it a little bit harder if the weight's a little bit too light for you, if that makes sense. Yeah, just a 3-second hold at the top, really squeeze in through that hold. Kind of touched on these already, but the main things to focus on in a hip thrust is keeping your chin tucked in. Try and keep your upper body as still as possible. You do see a lot of people like proper swinging up, and like their upper body like kind of flies back as their hips come up. Try not to do that. That's kind of giving you that little bit more momentum, and it's taking a lot of the work away from the glutes. So try and keep your upper body nice and still, and make sure that it's just your hips that are sort of like moving and your glutes are doing all the work. I did obviously mention feet positioning as well. So ideally you want to have your feet directly under your knees so that your knees make that right angle when you're at the top. If your feet are a bit too far away and they're a bit farther out, you're probably going to feel it a little bit more in your hamstrings. And if they're a bit farther in, they're a little bit too close, you're probably going to feel it a little bit more in your quads. So by having your feet directly under your knees is just kind of putting that isolation on the glutes that we want from this exercise. As I mentioned, you don't need to do that little pause at the top. I've just added it in to make it a little bit harder. If you've never done hip thrust before, I would just kind of stick to normal kind of up and down until you get used to the movement. Your glutes are most active in the contracted position in a hip thrust, so that is when you are at the top and your body's sort of making that shape. That is when your glutes are most active, so really squeeze at the top and get the most out of the movement and get those glutes on fire. So with hip thrusts, I would normally do either 3 or 4 sets, and I would go with roughly between like 8 and 12 reps per set. So next exercise, we have got a leg press. A leg press is a little bit different to a hip thrust. So in a hip thrust, it is more of a glute isolation exercise, and that is the only muscle that's going to be targeted when you're doing a hip thrust. Whereas a leg press is more of like a lower body compound movement, which means that it's going to be targeting your quads, your hamstrings, as well as your glutes. The main thing that you can do in a leg press to kind of make it a bit more glute focused is alter your foot position. I have always gone for high and wide to target glutes a little bit more. But I've recently seen on Instagram, specifically Coach Mark Carroll's Instagram, that he recommends going high and narrow. So like quite high up on the plate and obviously like feet together rather than wide. So I thought that I would give it a try, and I feel this a lot more in my glutes than I ever did when I did it high and wide. The main thing to focus on in a leg press is pushing through your heels, and also make sure that you don't completely lock your knees out when you're kind of pushing back. So with a leg press, I normally do 3 sets, and I normally go for a bit of a higher rep range with these, normally between like 10 and 15. So next up, we have got Bulgarian split squats. These are the devil's exercise. Like, they kill so much, but they're really good to include in like a glute focused workout. So you can kind of set these up anywhere in your gym. Same as a hip thrust, you could either use one of the plyo boxes, you could use a bench, you could use a step, and whatever you kind of have access to and whatever you feel kind of comfortable using. So you're gonna have your back foot resting on your box, your step, your bench, whatever you're using, and then you're just kind of gonna bring it down into a lunge slash squat. It's kind of a combination of the two, and just kind of make sure that you're getting as low as you can into that lunge. So with Bulgarian split squats, there's a few little adaptions that you can make to really help you to feel them in your glute. So the first thing you can do is widen your stance. So the closer your foot is to the box or the bench or whatever it is you're using, the more your quads are going to be activated. The further away that front foot is, the more that it's going to target your glutes. So I always like to have quite a wide stance on these. Another thing you can do is lean forward slightly. When you're kind of like closer and your body's kind of straight up and down, that's going to put a lot more focus on your quads. Whereas when you're further out and your body's kind of more on like a sort of like diagonal, again, that's going to target your glutes a lot more. So wider stance, leaning forward, slight diagonal with your body. For me anyways, that is the sweet spot for feeling these in my glutes. The main thing that people struggle with these is balance. I've noticed that a lot with my clients. If this is like a new exercise for you, I would always suggest doing it body weight to start off with, and if balance is something that you struggle with, I would maybe like recommend doing it next to a wall so you've got something to hold on to just to kind of help keep you stable, and then kind of gradually introduce the weights into it from there. So when you're doing Bulgarian split squats, you want to make sure that you're using that front foot to be pushing up, because that's the leg that is doing the work, and you want to make sure that your back foot's not kind of helping you up, if that makes sense. The front leg is the one that's working, that's the one that's being targeted in a split squat, so make sure that you're just using that leg, and push up through your heel and don't avoid using the back leg for any extra help. I always do 3 sets and anywhere between 8 to 10 reps for the Bulgarian split squat. So next up, we have got a little superset. So for anyone that doesn't know, a superset is when you do 2 exercises back to back. 2 exercises that we are going to do in this superset are Romanian deadlifts and triple contraction glute bridges. So I'll take you through the Romanian deadlifts first. I really like Romanian deadlifts for glutes. It is an exercise that does target your hamstrings as well as your glutes, but I can always really feel it in my glutes as well as my hamstrings, so yeah, it's definitely one of my favourite exercises. I prefer to do these with dumbbells, but you can use a bar if you prefer. It really doesn't make that much difference, so yeah, it's just down to personal preference. For the Romanian deadlift, you're gonna start standing up nice and straight with the weight in your hands. You want to have a very slight bend in your knee. From there, you're going to push your hips back as far as they will go. Really feel that stretch down the back, and then when you're in that position, drive your hips forward and come back up to that standing straight position. Romanian deadlifts are a hip hinge movement, so all of the movement is brought about by your hips moving backwards and forwards. So try not to think of the movement as like lowering the bar and lifting it up. Think of it more as your hips moving backwards and forwards, because naturally when you push your hips back, your upper body is just kind of naturally going to come down. So yeah, try and just focus on your hips moving backwards and forwards, and that'll really help with that glute activation and feeling it in your glutes. As with any type of deadlift, you want to make sure that your back is kept flat through the movement. Make sure that your shoulders are like kind of pulled back to keep it in that nice neutral position. The second exercise in the superset is triple contraction glute bridges. So for this one, you're just going to need a dumbbell and a mat. I always like to use a resistance band on these as well, just to make them a little bit harder, but that is optional. So a triple contraction glute bridge is basically the same as a normal glute bridge, but you're going to do like 3 pulses at the top of every rep. So lying flat on the floor, driving your hips up, squeezing at the top, and then doing those 3 little pulses before you bring it back down. Really squeeze on all of the pulses and your glutes will be on fire. I like to add that little triple contraction in, like I say, to make it a little bit harder, and it just kind of like mixes it up a little bit as well from a normal glute bridge. I really like these, and whenever I do them with my clients, they always seem to quite enjoy them as well. They like how they can really feel it in their glutes. Whenever I'm doing a glute bridge, I always lift my toes up and it's just my heels that are on the floor, and that really helps me to feel it in my glutes. Also, if you're using the resistance band, make sure you're actually getting the use out of it and push your knees out against it. If you've got a resistance band on and your knees are sort of like together, then it's not going to do anything. So make sure that you're kind of like pushing out against the resistance band to kind of get the use out of it if you're going to use one. So for the superset, I always do 3 rounds. I would do 10 to 12 Romanian deadlifts and then go straight into 10 to 12 of the glute bridges. Last exercise, we have got cable kickbacks. I feel like out of all of the exercises that I've gone through in this workout, the cable is definitely kind of the most intimidating type of equipment, especially if you've never used it before. I feel like there's a lot of different settings, there's a lot of different attachments. It does just look like a very intimidating like piece of equipment. But I'm going to take you through step by step how to set it up. And cable kickbacks can be really good for your glutes, so it's definitely a good one to incorporate into a glute workout. My gym has ankle straps, so that's what I use for cable kickbacks, but I know that not every gym has those. So if your gym doesn't have ankle straps, you could use one of the little handles that they have and just pop it around your shoe. I know that Pure Gym have like a specific strap for doing kickbacks, so you could always use one of those as well if that's what your gym has. For the cable machine, you want to have it set right to the bottom. So there's a little kind of like adjustment thing on the cable. Just make sure that it's set at the lowest level that it can. Make sure that it's clicked into place before you kind of go into the movement. But yeah, most of them are quite simple to use. For the cable kickbacks, you want to have both hands on the cable machine. That's just going to help with balance. Take a few steps back and lean forward slightly into it. There are a few different ways that you can do cable kickbacks. The way that I'm going to show you is with a straight leg, because I personally find that works better for me. But you can also do them with a bent leg. I'm sure you've seen like a few different variations on Instagram and stuff. But yeah, this is the way that I personally prefer. So the main thing to focus on in a cable kickback is to make sure that you're taking it nice and slow and controlled. I also like to kind of use my heel to lead the movement, so kind of like kicking back through my heel, if that makes sense. From that position where you're leaning forward, you're just gonna drive through your heel and kick your leg up and squeeze your bum at the top. Make sure your core is kept nice and tight. Your upper body shouldn't really be moving at all. It's literally just that leg that's kicking. You don't need to be kicking it up like super high either. I see a lot of people that kick like up as far as they can. I think that that's kind of where they seem to lose control a little bit. In this exercise, the higher you kick it doesn't mean that it's better. I do think that cable kickbacks are an exercise that does take a while to get used to. When I first started doing them, I really hated them as an exercise. I could never ever feel it in my glutes and I just was not a fan of them. But I picked them back up maybe like 6 months ago and I seem to be really enjoying them this time. Just kind of persevere with them. It might take you a while to kind of get used to it because it definitely did with me. So for cable kickbacks, again, I would do 3 sets and I normally go for between 10 to 12 reps on each side for these. And there we have a beginner friendly glute workout. Like I said at the beginning, there are loads of different other exercises and different variations that you can do as well as these exercises. These are just my personal favourites and ones that I would sort of like recommend doing, but that's not to say that some of the other exercises that you might have seen aren't good. I have tried to aim it more towards people that aren't quite as confident in the gym and they're maybe like new, they've not used a lot of the machines before, but that's not to say that if you are a bit more advanced that these exercises are like too easy or whatever. I've been doing like weight training for maybe like 5 years now and I still do every single one of these exercises, so just because they're in a beginner workout doesn't mean that they're easy. Hope that you found the video helpful and I hope that you've learned something. If you have got any questions about anything that I've spoken about, anything that I've mentioned, you can either leave a comment down below or you can message me on Instagram. I'll get back to you over there and answer any questions that you've got. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!